back to the size question, you can't do that with hundreds of people. You just can't. And so we said, what is the kind of the max number that most people can really care for and love well? For most people, it's about 15 to 30. Now you can know about 120, they say. 120 to 150, like an acquaintance, where you could see them in a restaurant and you'd sit down and say hi. But you won't care for them like family at that level. It's just impossible. You just can't. So, does that help with that question, or you want more? Let me tease it out some more.
Just how were you able to draw people into the vision that the Lord gave you?
Well, I'll tell you, I failed. I'm just going to tell you my failure. I was really inspirational, motivational, compelling. I can cast a compelling vision. I casted a vision of what would it look like if people lived this way. And the beauty of it is that it taps into a Christian's fundamental identity. Even you, as I'm talking, you're going, yeah! I mean, how many of you guys have seen the video of me talking about our missional community? Everybody watches that and they're like, I want that. But here's the deal. It's all overly romanticized. So when people come to move to join us in Tacoma, my wife, before they come, sits down and says, okay, here's the deal. You're going to hate it in about 3 months. So are you sure that you want to come? It's going to be the hardest thing you'll ever do in your entire life because you're going to have to die. But it'll be the best thing you've ever done because Jesus said if you die, you live. So do you want to do that? So I was really good at it's going to be amazing, and you're going to love it, and we're going to love one another, we're going to give everything we can, it's going to be amazing, who wants in? We all want in! And they all come. And then it was about a year or so, and they're like, this sucks, we hate life, and I don't like you anymore, and I'm tired, and I'm weary. And so what I didn't do well is I didn't talk to them about the truth of how Jesus is going to satisfy us, how He's the most compelling reason you should do this, because what He did for us. I mean, everything I've laid out here, Jesus did. Jesus is the perfect son who said, I'm going to treat everybody that doesn't belong to the family like they belong to the family. That's Jesus. Okay? He's the one who didn't come to be served, but to serve and give His life as a ransom for many. He's the one who was sent by God into a broken, messed up world to redeem it. I mean, so I didn't do a very good job until a year, 2 or 3, and I invited Keller into my life, into my heart, and all that stuff. Just kidding. But I do deeply appreciate God's use of him in our kingdom, in His kingdom. I mean, she's a great gift. If you don't know who Tim Keller is, you need to start listening to his gospel-centered stuff. So then I realized, man, I was motivating with the wrong stuff. I was motivating with a man-centered vision is what I was. This is crazy. And God said, no, make Jesus the center. Make this all about Him. And call people to live for the one who lived for them and died for them. And then what I started doing, and I'm getting better at this, I'm more honest about, you're going to suffer. You're going to die. You're going to have to die to yourself. Because discipleship at its core is daily death. You want to worship Jesus in all of life, you have to die in every aspect of your life. That's the only way you get to worship Jesus is you die to yourself so that He might live in and through you in every aspect. So you want to grow people in their finances, get them to die to their self-worship around money in this culture. I mean, it's our way to still control our world. It's the evidence of our idolatry is what we do with money. I mean, it's very easy to point out. It's hard to talk about because no one wants you to talk about that stuff. You're like, you don't have any business in that. Well, Jesus does. We're part of His family. So let's talk about how we're doing in that. So I didn't do a very good job, and I regret. I mean, what that means is I lost a lot of my core after a few years because they didn't buy into the vision of Jesus' fame and glory at the cost of our life. They bought into a romanticized view of church being all about them. So I just exchanged one consumerism to another. In the big church you were at, it was done well, program's great, you loved it. Now I'm going to call you something that's going to be all about you loving one another. It's going to be amazing. I just use the wrong motivation, which is it's still all about you. And so what you do is you attract a bunch of people who are like, cool, I'd love to be a part of a church where everybody cares about me. It's just the same idolatry. So be careful about that. I just warn you. Like discipleship is dying to self so that Jesus' life might be made known in and through us and we might become fully mature in Him. It's got to be about Him. And those who are truly His will follow. That's the other thing I think I'll just say straight. I think in our culture we have a lot of people who are going to be really surprised on that day when Jesus returns. Because He'll say, I never knew you. Depart from me. And I really believe that we've created such a cultural Christianity in North America, we don't even know what it means to be Christian anymore. I'm kind of, people are freaking out about we might experience persecution. I'm like, that could be the best thing that could ever happen to our country, is that people who are going to die for their faith are going to stand up and go, that's it, I will die for Jesus because I love him. But I think there's a lot of people are going to walk away in that day, unfortunately. Pray for our country, man. I pray that that gets revealed someday. And even in my own heart, where I'm, living with all kinds of falsehood, I want him to show that. I don't want to mess around with that. Yeah.
So you just kind of talked a little bit about how you cast the vision, what you did wrong. I wonder if you could talk about the people that you were dealing with a little bit, and maybe like the idea of where discipleship begins. Does it begin before believing and professing? Does it, and some of these examples that you might have had.
Yeah, let's be clear. Discipleship. So making disciples. Let's clarify the difference, because it's like, what does it mean to be a disciple, and what does it mean to make disciples? Okay? So to make disciples is to call people to follow Jesus. So in other words, like I said earlier, to increasingly submit all of life to his lordship. And to see that they're formed in their new identity in Christ through their baptism. And then to enable and equip them to obey him in all of life. That's what I'd say is the work of discipleship. So when do you begin making disciples? At the point of a relationship. As soon as you begin a relationship, you're in the process of making a disciple. With unbelievers, to be clear. So like, I'll tell you a little story about, some of you heard me talk about Clay, and I'll just tell you, like, Clay is a guy that I had the privilege of getting to see come to faith through our community, reaching out to him. He's still a mess, so it's just, I don't want to, like, anytime you tell a story, it's like, oh yeah, this is great, he's a perfect disciple. He's not. Neither am I, and so I just want to clarify that. But the story of Clay is, and one of the things we worked on hard in probably year 3 or 4 of some is we realized you can call people to the mission of making disciples, but if you don't help them get handles of what everyday life looks like with gospel intentionality, they don't know what it means. And so until you go, okay, this means you use meals very intentionally. Every meal is an opportunity to experience communion around Jesus Christ. Even if he doesn't come up in the conversation, they're experiencing you eat with them. Remember, Jesus was known as one who ate with sinners. He was called a glutton. And a drunkard. Why do you think he was called that? He ate a lot with people, and he drank a lot with people. Okay? Drunk. And so he goes, you guys are all calling me a glutton and a drunkard. John the Baptist came, and he didn't do any of it, and you had a problem with him, and I come, and I do all that, and you have a problem with me. Obviously, you have a problem with anybody who's about the kingdom of God. I mean, that's pretty much what he's saying. So but John had a reason not to. I have a reason to, and you still have a problem with it. Okay? Well, what was their fundamental problem? John was calling people who were sinners to repent and get ready for the king. Jesus was hanging out with people that the religious leaders didn't think belonged to the kingdom. And he included them. And when he ate with them, that was him saying, we're going to become one. I mean, his baptism, why did Jesus get baptized? Was he a sinner? Did he need to repent? No. He was identifying with sinners. He was identifying with their need to repent. Why did Jesus eat with people that religious leaders wouldn't? He was saying, these are the people I've come for. I didn't come for the healthy, I came for the sick. So we ate with them. So we started saying, you got to see meals as the opportunity to become one with people, to share your life with them, to identify with them, to get to know them, and to get to know their story when you do it. And while you get to know their story, you'll find out what their real needs are. And as you get to know their real needs, you're going to say, hey, we've been blessed to be a blessing. Everything we have is not our own. It's been given for the work of Jesus on this earth. So now we bless people. And then we celebrate the grace of God pouring in each other's lives. So we party really well. And we throw the best parties in the world. We should. We have the most to celebrate. And so then we celebrate well. And then we rest well because we can rest because God's running the world and saving people, not us. So we rest well. And we vacation well with one another. We play and we laugh and we have fun because the King is alive. And when he's with you, the party is going on. You don't fast. When he's in the middle of it, you celebrate, Jesus says. So you celebrate and you eat and you enjoy life together. So we just said, let's teach our people how to do that in everyday life with people who don't know Jesus. And then in the middle of it, they're going to go what is up with you guys? Why are you fun? I didn't think Christians were fun. Why do you party so well? Because I didn't think you guys liked to party. It's interesting that God commands Israel to party. And actually calls them to tithe to the party. He wanted them to be the most celebratory people on the planet. So everybody would want to come and be a part of the people of God. Why is it that you guys can rest and not be so worried all the time? Why is it that you're not all workaholics like everybody else in the world? Which I think is a real problem in the church right now, because I don't know that we could say that. Well, because he runs the world, because he's blessed us in Christ, because we're rich. I mean, think of all the answers you can give as the reason why you live so differently than the rest of the world. So then we're prepared to give an answer for the hope that's in us, like Peter said. And so we just trained our people how to do that and to say all of life. And so begin doing that with people that are just, God's sent you to, because you're a missionary. So we did that with, I remember we went to a Halloween party, because in our neighborhood we realized one of our mission jobs was to create a culture in our city of what the kingdom of God would look like if it broke into our neighborhood. And I'd say that's part of the job of a missional community, is to be a kingdom people that show the world what Jesus' rule and reign looks like today on this earth. Okay, so we're like, well, let's throw great parties. So we did every Friday night, barbecue, cookout at our house. For the South, barbecue for us means just have a grill and you put something on, and it's not true barbecue, I know. And those of you who are not from the South, you know what I meant. So like we do a cookout, and we'd say, hey, we'll always provide some condiments and drinks and some snacks. And for a while, we always provided the meat, but after a while, you do that every Friday night. You get a lot of people, you can't afford it for a while. So we couldn't always do that, but we did for a while. And we just said, every Friday night, it's at our house. And I went around with my daughter, and we'd invite all of our neighbors, and people didn't come. I've talked to other people, though, like, yeah, we tried that whole party thing, invited our neighbors, no one came, so we figured it doesn't work here. I'm like, oh, really? So Jesus shows up, and, he goes, hey, come to the kingdom, no one follows? Do you think he goes like, that doesn't work, I'm going back home? No, he doesn't stop until his job's done. Your job is to bring the kingdom culture into your community. So until it's there, you're not done. So they didn't get it? It's because they don't know the king yet. Keep doing it. And so we said every single week until everyone's been there. And so we kept going around, hey, we noticed you didn't come last Friday. We want to create a neighborhood that loves to party together. So we want to keep working on this. So you're here. Are you moving away? No. Okay, well, we're not either. So it looks like we should be working on this. And I remember when it shifted, and one of our neighbors said, whenever people move into our neighborhood now, and I'll just have to be honest, I feel like we've slipped a little bit in my own neighborhood now, because a bunch of the people we developed and reached, they moved. So I feel like we're starting all over again. But one of the things that we'll say is, hey, you moved in the right neighborhood. This is the neighborhood that likes to party together. Well, that became normal. And then I remember I was invited over for a Halloween party at my neighbor's house that haven't submitted to Jesus. But we come to the party and they say, hey, this is Jeff and Janie, and Jeff's a pastor, but he's not like normal pastors. And in the Northwest, you need to do that, because the idea of a pastor is not always a very good thing where I live. And so they introduce me, and they say, hey, this is Clay and Christy. And she, my friend Amy, says, I thought you guys might be interested in talking, because I know, Clay, you've been asking questions about religion and stuff, and maybe Jeff's a good guy to talk to. I love it when non-Christians are the ones who are actually doing the evangelism work for you. And that's what happens when you have a life that's attractive and it's around Jesus. They're going, okay, I don't agree with Jesus. I like your life, and I bet my friend might like it too. And so that's what started happening. And so we meet Clay and Christy. I go trick-or-treating with them, and I get to know his story. And I find out, okay, because here, what am I doing? I'm going, Lord, how is he going to get led to Jesus? I've got to know his language. I've got to know his culture. I've got to know his background. I've got to know what it means to him when I say something, because I might think I'm telling him the gospel, but what I might be actually doing is speaking in a foreign language. And I've got to learn him. So I learn Clay, and I'm asking questions, and I'm getting to know him. And we try to train all our mission community. Get to know the story of someone else. Don't just tell them what you believe. Evangelism is almost more listening than it is speaking. And then you speak at the right time. You've got to get to know their language and their culture. And so we did that, and I remember it was about a month later, Clay and Christy call us up and say, hey, we're going to the ocean. You guys want to come with us? And this is, in the Northwest, people don't do this, just so you know. It's a fairly passive and kind of private culture in a lot of ways, especially when you get to having kids, because you want to protect your kids and all that. So for them to invite us to go stay in a house with them for the weekend, they just met us a month ago. It's crazy. So I call one of our elders and say, hey, I can't be preaching this Sunday. I need to go join them. Can someone take over? And they're like, yeah, that's what we're here for. Which, by the way, I think that's a lesson the church has got to learn, is that you're willing to leave the gathering of the saints on a Sunday for the sake of those who aren't there when God opens the door. You leave the 99 to find the one lost sheep. And so I don't think we give our people permission to do that. So they're like, man, the buddies all want to go golf on Sunday morning. They're all the unbelieving friends. And we go, you can't do that. It's Sunday. What do you mean you can't do that? That's the whole point of why the church is here. We're trying to reach the lost. So we can't just go like, I don't have time for that. You got to make time for it. So we went away, vacation for the weekend. We're sitting around in the hot tub. We put our kids to bed, and we're talking. And they're like, so we want to talk to you about why we brought you here. And I'm in the Northwest, so you just don't know what that means. When you're in a hot tub with another couple, you know, like, just, whoa, here we go. And I mean, we've been in some of those situations. I've been in moments where I'm like, this is where it gets messy. A mission is messy. So just to be clear, if you're going to train people to be a missional community, they got to prepare for the mess and the complexity and the tension of being Christians in a broken world. And if all they've learned is legalistic answers to what's right and wrong, and they think they have a black and white world, like we don't do this and we do this, you're going to be in trouble. Because you're going to get into places like Peter where God's going to go, eat the food. And he's going to go, don't call anything that I created unclean. And you're going to go, but yeah, but all my life we've said no to that. I know, but I'm saying yes to it now. Like, those moments will happen if you're on mission. Just guaranteed. And so you got to prepare your people for that. Because that's a cultural application of the gospel that you got to help them walk through in freedom in Christ. With also going, how much license do we have? And let's not just go fall into licentious living. Okay? So we're sitting there and we're talking. Thankfully, that wasn't what was going to happen. And they said, you know, our daughter's been asking us questions about God, and we thought maybe we could ask you if you could help us know what to do with that. Well, when did discipleship begin? Yeah, trick-or-treating. Okay? It's still going on. He's still not a believer. So what I tell him, okay, Clay, I just want to let you know what I'm about to teach you. It's going to be your job in your household to train up your kids in the God they should worship and how they're going to follow Him. So listen well. And so that I go through the story of God. Right? And we teach all of our people to be able to do an oral telling from Genesis to Revelation about the redemptive plan of God. I go through that in the hot tub. By the way, if your people can't do that, they won't be able to make disciples effectively. Because they'll be like, well, I got to get my Bible, or, you know, I got to quote some verses, and they quote verses out of context, and the unbelievers going like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, for God so loved the world, He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in Him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. Why do I need it? I mean, what is everlasting life? And what do you mean perish? I didn't know I was perishing. And like, they don't know the plan of God that says God's wrath is being revealed against all the unrighteousness and ungodliness of men. Well, why is that? Because they don't know the story of Adam and Eve. And they don't know it. They need the story. And increasingly, for especially this generation, you need to understand most people are biblically illiterate. They don't have a clue about the story of God. So you've got to give them a framework in which the gospel makes sense. So I do that in the hot tub. Because I'm not just thinking about getting him to come to faith. I'm thinking about training up Clay to eventually be able to tell the story. See, I'm discipling him before he comes to faith. So I go through a story. I give him a storybook Bible. So you might want to read this with your kids. Hoping he'll read it too. And then time passes, and he starts hanging out with our mission community. Starts working in our community garden, where we're loving our neighbor lady who's a widow and who's been a recluse for 15 years and became a hoarder. And her backyard is overgrown. You guys, if you've seen the video, you saw the community garden that we worked on there, and built that in her backyard so people would get into her life. She wouldn't let us in her home, but we thought at least we'll get in the backyard. She eventually came to faith. Clay watched that process. So he's watching somebody who's hurt and broken and in need get cared for, loved, and served, and her coming to faith. And he watched the whole thing. He saw her get baptized in the ocean. You know, he watched all this. Still not believing. I tried to invite him to come to when we were doing our more formal discussions about the story of God in our mission community. He's like, no, I don't want to come to that. But he'd come to the serving. He'd come to the party. He'd come to the meal. And then he calls me up one night and he goes, hey, could I come to that thing you guys do? We had thrown a big 40-year birthday party for me. My wife did, and it was a massive, amazing party. And he got to watch people toast Jesus' work in my life. It was a mixed group of believers and unbelievers. And he's like, I know at that building where you had your party, you guys go there once in a while, right? Like a bunch of you meet there on Sunday? I'm like, yeah. I love it when people have no clue what the church is. You know, I'm like, yeah. He goes, can I come? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, do I need to be a member or dress a certain way? I said, no, you just come. I mean, it's fine. And he didn't show up. And then he calls again. This happened to be Easter week, and he didn't have a clue that Easter for us is a special holiday. He just knows, you know, chocolate and candy and all that. So I said, we're thinking about coming this Sunday. I said, all right. And I'm like, you know, I don't know how you are, if any of you preach or teach, but when you think about the guy you've been pouring your life into for a year and a half, and you're going, he's going to show up and I'm giving an Easter message, it's like, I'm going to see him, because our building isn't that big, so I could see where he's sitting. He could see me, and he's like, this is the guy I've been watching for a year and a half. You know, so I get up and I preach my guts out. At the end, go up to him, and he's just like this, standing there. And his wife is sitting next to him in a pool of tears, just weeping. And I'm like, what's up with her? He's like, I think this is what she's always wanted. And I said, well, what about you? He goes, I don't know. I said, you want to talk? He goes, I can hardly speak. I'm like, would you like me to leave you alone? Yeah. So I'm like, all right. So I don't know what to do other than I'm going, Lord, please. I don't know what happened. I mean, this could be the moment where he goes like, I want nothing to do with this. Or it could be the moment in which the Spirit broke in and changed his heart. And he calls me up later that week. He says, can we meet in the community garden? I said, yeah. So we show up and I go, what's up? He goes, I want in. I said, what do you mean? He goes, I want it, man. Like what you said on Sunday, I believe that. And I laid out the gospel and life after death, the resurrection. The resurrection isn't you go to heaven when you die. It's you get a new body to live eternally in a new heaven and a new earth with Jesus at the center. I mean, it's beautiful. It's not just floating on a cloud in an unembodied state someday. You know, I can't wait. Oh, it's going to be awesome. And he's like, I want that. I believe it. And I said, what do you believe? He goes, I believe that Jesus died on the cross for my sins. I said, you believe you're a sinner? He said, yeah. We just walked through affirming, make sure that I just let him profess what God was doing in his heart. And he did. It was beautiful. And I said, well, it sounds to me like God gave you a new life. And he said, well, what do I do? So the Bible commands that you get baptized, because that's your public way of saying that I have a new beginning, and I have a new father, and a new king, and a new power. And he used to always talk to me like, I love the power I see in you. I don't know what it is. And I said, that's the Spirit. And I said, do you have it now? He goes, yeah, I do. He has a Spirit. And I'm like, all right. That's the evidence that you're a child of God. You have the Spirit of God. I said, what's he telling you? What's the Father saying to you? What do you hear? He goes, I'm loved. I go, that's what the Spirit says. So I'm affirming all that I know the Spirit will say to a new believer. And making sure it's real. I'm not just going like, hey, pray the prayer across the line. Like, I want to know the Spirit gave you new life. And he did. And he goes, and I want to be a part of this. And I want to do what you did. I want to tell people about it. And I want to read my Bible. And he's laying all this stuff out. And well, where did he learn all these basics of the Christian faith? Watching me. He didn't need a new believers class. Do you know why you need a new believers class? Because you did disciple them to faith. You think that you disciple them after faith. That's not how Jesus ever did it. Some of them still doubted in Matthew 28. You know, he was discipling them to himself in all of life. And he had patience. I mean, do you think about it? And he did it a couple times where you're like, how much longer do I have to put up with you? You know, like, you see some of that, Jesus being real honest. But 3.5 years of his life to 11 at the end. 11! I mean, how many of us would be willing to spend 3 years with 11 people who seem to not get it? Right? And this is the King of Kings. This is the Creator of the universe, humbling himself. Don't miss this. He spent 30 years just being a human. No ministry at all. 30 years. Living in the neighborhood. Understanding humanity to its fullest extent. So he could say later, I understand. I can empathize with all of your weaknesses. I've been tempted in every way as you are, but I'm without sin. Like, he did that for us. That ought to inform how we live as the church. Because he's the one we're following. He's our example. And he's the one who's doing it in his church today. He will build his church. And if it doesn't look a lot like Jesus, we should be asking ourselves, which church is this? Is this his church? Because if it doesn't look like him, we should question whether or not it is him. And I'm convinced we can build churches without Jesus and without his Spirit these days. You can do it. I mean, you can get anybody to do something if it satisfies their heart's desires enough. But to get people to die for the sake of the fame of Jesus Christ, only Jesus could do that. And I would just ask, are we leading people to a life that can't be lived without Jesus? And are we leading them to a mission that can't be accomplished without His Spirit? And are we leading them to live in such a way that demands they must know the love of God, to love others? Because they love people who are jerks and reject them because we were that to God, and now we know what it's like to be loved that way.
Right.
So we love others that way. Like that's the kind of people we're called to be. So that's a bit of a story of what it looks like. It started pre-conversion, but I was discipling him all along the way. And if you can help people embrace that discipleship begins at the point of relationship, now all of life counts.
Right.
Now all of life is the work of the church. But if they think it doesn't start until they come to church gatherings, or they go to a class, or they start reading the Bible with you, then you'll think that discipleship is for those who are really serious. But discipleship is disciples of Jesus being disciple makers in all of life. That's what discipleship is. Which means those who are doing it are very serious. But those who it's being done to don't have a clue half the time. Just like my kids don't know they're being discipled. They don't know how intentional Dad's being about forming them in their faith. But man, I'm trying to take every single moment I got with my kids and make it a moment where I lead them to Jesus Christ. I'm discipling my kids before they believe. I'm discipling when they don't even realize it's happening. And that's what we are as the church, is we're a culture. And that's what we're supposed to do, is create a culture that's like the Petri dish for Jesus people. It's to make them more and more like Christ as you keep leading them to Jesus in all of life. That's how you get to the original statement. Discipleship is leading them to increasingly submit all of life to Jesus. If they never see what life looks like submitted to Jesus, they won't know what it means to be a disciple of Jesus. So they're going to have to see it in you. You have to watch your life. And when you screw up, just to be clear, the beauty of the gospel is when you're terrible at it, Jesus still looks good. So you go like, you know what, I know I just yelled at my wife, and right now we got some real struggles in our marriage. Praise the Lord, I'm forgiven. And He's got grace for me, and I'm asking for help. And I'm going to tell you how we deal with it when we fail. When we get grace, we can go to Jesus again and know we're already forgiven, loved, and accepted. We can ask for His power to help us do things no one else can do. Like, it's good news when I screw up. And it's good news when I do well, because I can go, that wasn't me, that was Jesus working His life through me. And either way, Jesus gets the glory, and they get to see that it's all about Jesus, not about me. So that's the beauty of real life, is they'll see both your need for the gospel, and they'll see the gospel's power at work in you. So you had another question I'm going to come to you, because as a follow-up.
So, I mean, what you just described can happen in a family, family in a community, can do things just like what you described?
No, they can't.
Okay.
So a husband, wife, and kids can't do what I just described. They can do it. They can't do it to the fullness of the kingdom, because they can't show what the kingdom of God looks like in a family unit in North America. Because in North America, the family unit is the center of idolatry. So until they bring others in, like a household, which is what the biblical picture of church was a household, which wasn't your immediate family, it was all the people that you included into your life that helped your life become what it was meant to be. We've defined family wrongly. The Bible doesn't define it that way. It's much more than just your blood relatives. And so, if you're talking family that way, then yes, you can do it. But if you're talking family, husband, wife, and a few kids, everybody can look at it and go, well, of course you love them. They're your kids. Of course you put up with them. They're your blood. They're your name. You look good when they look good. It can all be self-motivated. When you start letting people come into your family, when you start loving people who don't belong to your family like their family, now we're in the kingdom of God. Because that's the kingdom. Jesus even says, who are my brothers and sisters? Who are my mom and dad? Those who do the will of my Father. So He redefines family for us. And we have to redefine family in the church. Because right now it seems to me like churches define family primarily as the nuclear family, instead of the biblical family. So I would say if you define family biblically, then I think you're right. If you define it in an American way, I think you're wrong.
But now, is that a missional community, a family living the way that you just described? Or does it need to be attached to a church structure and government? Does that need to be there?
I think eventually you're going to need some kind of governance or at least authority structures. So like for us, we started with a missional community, it multiplied to 4. And then as it grew, we saw elders rise up that could give oversight to more than one family. And so they could manage their own household well, missional community. Now they can give oversight to more.
Were you under a church?
Yeah, we were sent by a church with God so that we submitted to other authority while we were sent out. Saw that as a biblical pattern, that even Paul and Barnabas go out under the authority of the Antioch leadership. They're set apart by that leadership to do it. Come back and report to that leadership as a form of accountability. I think there's a lot of rogue work going on, which is anti-authoritarian. Which is, again, even Jesus did everything under the authority of the Father. Yep. He never was without authority his entire life. He said, I only do what the Father tells me to do. So that's our model. We've got to submit in the way that Jesus submitted. So, you had your hand up and I'll come back.
How long has someone been going?
We've been about 8 years.
Okay. You kind of have said, hey, I started out with a Christocentric motivation and I moved that way. Then you talk about like transfer people coming in that want to do this kind of thing, and then your wife gives them the talk. You probably have one of the best views of missional communities. our church does that in an urban environment. But I think we have the same issue. But I think it would help some of us who are doing that kind of work to say, in your experience, what are the top 5 diseases, beasts in the American church that have to have a bullet in the head? And you constantly have to put the bullet in the head of these things.
It's good.
It's going to work. Because we're facing that ground.
What are the ongoing challenges that you've got to shoot down regularly?
Yeah, you just nailed, like,
Yep.
family is the center of idolatry. You're just spitting out all these idols that have to be slain.
Yep.
Can you kind of like...
Yeah, I'll do. There's several of them. So one, family is one is an idolatry in the church right now. I mean, just don't hear me wrong. I'm not saying you shouldn't love your family and care for them, because if you don't, you're worse than an unbeliever. Because we got to do that. But I've had many people go, "How can you do this with kids?" I'm like, "How can you disciple your kids if you don't do this?" Like, I don't know how your kids are ever going to learn what it looks like to serve and to share the gospel and all of life if you don't do it with them. So, like, it's the best way to disciple my kids is to do mission with them. My kids, when they think of church, now sometimes they still slip into it because mom grew up in another kind of church, and every once in a while she'll say, we go to church, and they'll correct her and go, "No, Mom, we don't go to church, we are the church." But hopefully their form and understanding of church more and more is, it's us. Under authority, of course. So that's one. Second is the idolization of the house. And I mean the physical house.
Yeah.
In North America, it's our castle. And we believe we have rights to a refuge place in our house. And this is pastors, just so it's clear. Like, across the country, one of the things I have to address is, your house is not your castle. It is your front door of ministry. And biblically, if you don't exercise hospitality, you're disqualified as an elder. That's right. And hospitality is not having Christians over that you trust. It's inviting the strangers that don't know Jesus into your home.
That's good.
That's a biblical picture of what it means to use your house. Okay, and that was normative for the early church. In our culture, that's the exception to the rule, unfortunately. I mean, that's the exception altogether. And so what you got to teach people is, no, who's your refuge? Jesus is your refuge, not your house. So that's a big one.
The front door to the what? The front door to what?
It's the front. It's the front door to mission and ministry. Because where else are they going to see discipleship other than in your household? I mean, it's the best means of discipleship you've got is your family and your house. So, I mean, there's other stuff. I mean, you got to get out on the street and get in, places where people are. But they're not going to know what it looks like to follow Jesus as a family until they get to be in one. And they're gonna think you love your house more than them if you never let them in it. That's what's going to happen, and that's what everybody believes in our country. Suburbs were built to affirm that idea by putting a fence around everything, making the garage door open so you could go in and not have to talk to anybody, live in your house and live in your backyard in protection and seclusion. That's at the heart of suburban living. Now, there's a change going. New suburban developments are saying, put the front porch back, make a center in the homes of like a park so people get back out in community with one another and get people exposed, because everyone knows it kills you to live that life. Even non-Christian sociologists are saying it's killing us in North America to live the suburban lifestyle. So that's one of them. I'll get through a few others. The idea that the missional community is a meeting, a weekly meeting, and it's just taking the idea of church as an event and applying it just to a new form. Like, I still hear it in our people, and I'm constantly correcting it. Are you going to missional community night? And I just go like, wait a minute. Are we going to Vanderstelt tonight? That's my last name. The Vanderstelt family, are we going to it? My kids are like, well, we don't go to us. We are it. Okay, so why would you go to a missional community? A missional community is God's people on mission together in the world. You don't go to it, you are it. Why don't you ask, are we going to gather with a missional community tonight? Are we going to go to family meal tonight? Or whatever. So even that, it slips, and people think it's an event for 3 hours on a Wednesday night that we go to, we eat, we talk about the mission, and then we go off on our own individual missions once again. And so that's a big one you have to keep confronting. Another one is that mission easily slips away from people to stuff. So like, oh, what's your mission? It's to clean up a neighborhood, or to fix a school, or to deal with homelessness, and you make it a social justice issue or a place issue instead of real people with real faces and real names that you want to fall in love with Jesus and live their life for Him. So that's a big one you have to keep watching. Another one is you can over-professionalize the mission so that it's inaccessible to most people. So the more that you do something, the better you get at it, and the better you get at it, the more the standard rises up to a level that most people can't access. And this happens in churches as they get bigger too. The bigger the church gets, the harder it is to enter into being in leadership or to enter into being able to be a part of that church. So it happens at all levels, even missional communities. You can go like, well, man, I don't know if you can be a missional community leader because until you can you can quote the whole Bible and you're leading people to Christ left and right. And you start making these standards. What is your best instead of what's the entry point of a disciple-making person? And so what I'm trying to say many times now is make the entry point a big, wide open door and make the requirements of what they'll do start to refine them and train them as they keep going forward. So that's another killer, is to over-professionalize it. There's a scalability problem, I'll just be real honest with. The larger you get and the number of mission communities you get, the more the challenge becomes for communication and leadership and authority and all that, because you just get spread out. A decentralized church is hard to learn how to lead. That's why I get why people would rather just do Sunday. It's a lot easier to oversee because you think you're doing it because they're all in the same room at the same time. You're not, because you don't really know what's going on in their household, but you think you do. So those are some of the big ones that come to mind. Obviously, selfishness. Eventually people will like the missional community so much they won't want to go start another one because they love being with each other. It's like now that they love each other more than they love Jesus. It's like don't ruin our comfortable zone. We like this. We like how it's been for the last year or two. And so they either don't send people out to start new ones, or they don't let anybody new come in because it'll ruin what you have. So watch out for the idolatry of community. In fact, a lot of people like missional community because they worship community. Like they like the idea of a community that's all about them. So watch that. That'll happen. Watch for gospel slip. People will start using all kinds of other means to motivate people for mission instead of the gospel. That happens all the time, especially when you get frustrated with people not moving quick enough. So, and then watch for the fact that at some point people are going to realize this is really costly, and they might start to hedge their bets a little bit financially. Keeping people out of certain decision making in their life, and because they realize that they did it before and it cost them a lot. And then I'd say here's another one. There's a lot of them. Watch out for the reality that most people don't know how to grieve. And a mission requires regular grieving because you're sending people out, and so there's real death. And if you don't teach them how to grieve the loss of people, they'll stop doing it. And it also requires grieving because your life's you're going to get hurt. You really will. This kind of life, I'm just telling you, it's painful. Sometimes it's very frustrating. If you don't teach people how to grieve, they'll harden their heart towards relationships. So, that was a lot.
Yeah, that's good though.
Good. Yeah.
He was.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
It was actually it was a perfect question piggybacking off of what you mentioned before this with the authority and connection to the local church. But what do you do when you're a leader but not the lead guy? And this is your passion.
Yeah.
Like God's been kind of building you to flow that way and do ministry that way and see life that way. Mm-hmm. But if you start doing that, you're going to ultimately divide the church.
Mm-hmm. You don't do that.
Right, and you don't want to do that. So what do you?
So just because I'm trying to capture on the recording too, I think I've had a lot of these conversations with a lot of young leaders lately who would say the same thing. It's like, okay, I'm in a church. They're not going to go in this direction. I know I need to. I'm compelled to. What do I do? This is what I've said consistently is, first of all, go to your leadership and just say, hey, my heart is just burning like crazy to live this kind of life and be on this kind of mission. Would that be welcomed here? Would you want me to live that way here? Just submit to them. Say, because I know I need covering, and I don't want to do this without authority. So, what do you think? This is what it'd look like. Paint a picture. Be honest. Don't all it's going to be is I'll just do a Bible study once in a while. I want to call people to go reach people together like missionaries do all over the world. Like the people we send to other countries. Could you do that with me here? I would like to do that here in my neighborhood. I'm going to call people to join me and love one another like family in the midst of this broken world. We're going to serve them. This is what I think we'll be doing and how much time it might take or how we're going to reorder our lives to do it. And give them a real picture. Would that be welcomed here? Because they might go like, you had no idea that's what we want everybody to do. We just didn't know how to put language to it. Thank you for helping us. Or they might go, yeah, that's not really what we want. We're kind of hoping that all the energy primarily is going to Sunday and that's it. And they might say that. And I've had guys say that. And So then I think you asked, then what should I do? Because I don't want to be divisive. I want to submit and honor the leaders here, but in my heart I know I'm called to this. So I'd like your advice and counsel. Should I stay, even though I know I need to be obedient to this, or should I go with your blessing? And because I know I have to. And then it allows them to be a part of influencing that. And they might even go like, you know what, we got to talk to you because we think you're jacked up. That's why we wouldn't say good to go. We got stuff we got to talk to you about in your life. So then you go, great, I want to hear it. And now you're in a place of humility, and they can coach you and go like, man, I'm glad you took, I wish you'd have said that because I didn't know that about myself. I'm glad this conversation did it. Now, if that were to change in me, would you be open to me doing it? No, I still would. Okay, but thanks for the help. Now what do I do next? And I've seen a lot of churches go, man, we want to bless it. And then they'll connect it to other churches that are doing it and help them get started. So I think that's how you start moving toward it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, can I
you can ask
another
another one, yeah.
And tell me if this is too nuanced, and you say, let me talk to you about that later.
Yeah, okay.
But like in our kind of local church setting, the autonomy that, at least that I've been given with the ministries that I oversee, I know that I got the autonomy to do that.
To do it in your context.
Even though it's countercultural to the rest of the church.
Yeah. Just prepare them for what's going to happen. So like I was in a position, this is not anything I need to hide, when I was at Willow Creek, that I was leading it towards a more decentralized approach. We went to 27 different locations under my leadership in the youth ministry, and Hybels could see this is going out, not in. And you know, the Willow doesn't plant churches, so it's like, okay, I'm now moving away from their fundamental philosophy. And so at that point, we're like, okay, what do we do? So you almost need to say, like, just so you know, if we do this, it's going to lead to church planting. Because that's what, just to be clear, and I'd say that's another one of the dangers, is leaders set a ceiling on their people. And it's like, if the ceiling is, you could never leave here and start another church, then everybody knows you can't grow up and leave home. It's like if you said to your kids, we want you to be really good members of the household, but man, you ever leave here, we'll see that as disloyalty. So you don't get to have a wife and kids in your own house someday. You have to be here. If that's what if people believe that, they'll never grow up. So the church never grows up if it knows that it'll never get to lead its own household, so it stays in perpetual immaturity or adolescence. That's what happens for most believers. But if a church says, no, we celebrate people leaving and starting new works, then people will grow up to a higher level. So if there's a ceiling like that, you need to be honest and say, if we keep doing this over here where you've given me all this freedom, it's probably going to lead to potential new churches getting started. Are we okay with that? Just so we know. Because I don't want it to ever be a surprise to you one day when people start leaving to go start new works. Would that seem like we're against the church or for the church and its mission? You've got to have that conversation. Because what I'm talking about will lead to that. Mm-hmm. Hopefully what you guys are seeing in this is we're really just treating every missional community like a potential core group of a new church. That's what you're doing. So when they buy into the idea they can be the church together, it's going to release the people of God for really creative kingdom work. It really does. It's beautiful. It's messy. It's a beautiful mess. But it will lead to gospel work that you never would have come up with on your own. That's what I love about it. Like, if you were to ask, well, what's a typical missional community like? I'd go like, I don't know. Because they're all different. They're all in different stages of growth and development. Some are really good. Some really stink. You know, some are reaching a particular people group. Others are reaching a particular location, geography. They're all a little different. That's the beauty of the kingdom. The diversity of the gospel work in our city. I hope it gets more different, not more the same. That's what, in other words, just so it's clear, you can't reach an urban context unless you do this. I'm convinced. I'm convinced of it. You could have a big church in a city. It'll never change the city unless you release your people into all the places of life in the city. That's the only way cities are going to get changed. So, I almost should have titled this, How City Transformation Requires Missional Communities, instead of How Discipleship Requires It. Because you won't change the city apart from it. So, yeah, you're welcome.
What do you say to some challenges that this might focus us as Americans a little too much on America, and that we won't go to the outer parts of the ends of the earth?
It's a great
and reach
question.
the unreached people.
It's a great question. What's the potential for this becoming all about us in North America and not to the ends of the earth? When we first started, one of the things, and I didn't put this up here, was, and I probably should have talked to it a little bit more, but the Great Commission is all nations. That's right. And so we asked ourselves, how are we going to train our people so that we'll reach all nations? Well, what we have to do is we have to teach them in transferable, reproducible principles that will go to any part of the world. And if they can learn how to do it here, they can do it anywhere. So that was built into our original structure, was we expect people to go to other parts of the world. And so we're regularly asking, okay, are you leaving to start a new mission community? Are you going to go to another city? Or are you going to go to another part of the world? Like that's the question you got to keep asking people. So like right now, we're getting ready to send a group to Haiti, and they want to see 10,000 missional communities in Haiti. Well, they were trained with us for the last couple of years to go and bring that forward. And they've already gotten started. They've got Haitians already beginning to do it. It's all indigenous in nature. Now, the people that are going are from the States, but they're just raising up leaders in Haiti to do it. I think, actually, I would ask the other question, how is the church as it exists ever going to reach the nations when most of what we do in North America can't be reproduced in another part of the world? Yep. And where it has been, you see it's kind of gross. And you show up and you're like, people that normally wear like some kind of like very little clothing, and then they're showing up with a suit and tie on Sunday. You're like, where did that come from? Not from this culture, you know? And why are they singing our songs? And like you're going, no one ever taught them that they're the image bearers of God, created for good works that He prepared in advance for them to do in their tongue and place. Like, and so they look like us. So I think the beauty of what we've been doing is it actually brings it back down to what would be the normative for the church that should be culturally expressed in unique ways.
Can I just clarify a little bit? Just more so thinking that this is very comfortable for us, and it doesn't push you.
Doesn't push you out.
Want to go out.
Gotcha.
I'm ministering. I'm from LA. I live in LA. I'm ministering in LA. I'm doing my missional community thing, if you will. In LA, I'm good. Yeah. And there's no need or desire to reach unreached people groups.
And I think that's the potential of what we talked about before, is that there's always that potential to go like, I love my life. And I think if a mission community grows in its regular sending of people out to start new works, it starts to build a sending mentality into the people of God, who's willing to go like, we're leaving our group because there's another people across the city that aren't getting reached, and we're going to move in and go reach them. You train people to start thinking like that, then they start going like, well, wait a minute, what about across the ocean? But if you don't train them to think that way, they'll never do the next. And I think what we tend to do is we tend to go like, okay, we're part of the church, we do Mission Sunday, who's going to go to other countries? And they're all going like, dude, I can't even go across the street. You want me to go across the world? So I think we've got to train them like children into adolescence. Say, okay, you're going across the street to meet your neighbors. Now you're going across the city starting a missional community. Now we might be going to another city where